continue together to hear the talk from Dr. Peter Schuerman. As he let you know, he works as the Director of Innovation Management for A&M AgriLife Research. His bachelor's degree is in botany from Colorado State University and a Ph.D. in genetics from UC Davis, and also a USDA postdoctoral fellow. So he focuses on optimizing the way that universities work with industry. He got his start at the University of Florida's Office of Technology Licensing, and if I might say, go Gators. And go Aggies too, I had to add that. And subsequently joined the Office of Technology Transfer at Rice University. So now, recently served as the Director for Licensing and Intellectual Property for the A&M University System, and he, in that position, created new approaches to commercialization that led to record levels of revenues and research funding from industry. Prior to this, he was a founding member and architect of the Industry Alliance's office at UC Berkeley, an office which nearly tripled industry support in its first year. So we're very glad to have him with AgriLife Research, and appreciate him being here today to share with us his talk on innovation management, creating your strategy to change the world.
Thanks, Jamie. Well, so appreciate the opportunity to talk with y'all. I found out about technology commercialization entirely by accident. I was in graduate school. My boss saw what I was doing, my major professor, and he said, "Oh, you've invented something." And I said, "Well, I didn't mean to." And he said, "This is Tech Transfer Office. They're in Oakland. You need to submit a form. It's one of the obligations you have." I said, "Okay." And I submitted it, and I'm not going to go into the details. It was basically a mutant strain that produced exotic carbohydrates. But the first question I had from the Tech Transfer Office was, "Well, who would be interested in this?" And I said, "Well, I thought that was your job. I'm working on my thesis." And so I can really relate to, and I can really understand some of the barriers that exist in going from, what's happening in research programs to commercialization. So I have to say, though, as a result of my experience, I fell in love with the concept of leveraging all these billions of dollars that go into universities to stimulate the discovery of new knowledge and new ways of looking at the world and new ways of doing things. What have always been a bit of a skeptic about, and that 13 years ago I got into technology commercialization with this kind of skeptical approach, is how it's being done. And so it's a long pipeline that starts at the bench top and ends up, people being able to buy something, people being able to receive some sort of service in the marketplace that can benefit their lives. It's a long process, and I think we have a tremendous responsibility to the taxpayers that have all invested in us so much because they're hoping that we're going to, help them live in a better world. I mean, let's face it, the future is where we're going to spend the rest of our lives. So if we don't fully rise to that challenge, there's a lot of questions that can be asked, not only by others, but of ourselves. And what I think we have an opportunity to do is to rethink how we approach innovation. Recognize that there are some really mental barriers that keep us from really participating in this very exciting area of changing the world. And what I want to try and do today is show you some approaches that you can take, some ways you can think that can help you, have maximal impact with your research programs. So the first thing I want to cover is the fact that commercialization and industry engagement is a new game with a new set of rules. If you try to approach this using the set of rules that you're using now to play the university game, you will probably not succeed. In fact, I can guarantee it. I also want to talk about why intellectual property rights matter, why you need a strategy and partners in order to increase the impact of your research programs, and some resources that are available to everyone here today to be successful. So what is innovation management? So first thing to recognize is that innovation is a process. It's not a single event. It's not like eureka and that's the innovation. Innovation is about not only having that eureka moment, but recognizing that it's a eureka moment, recognizing that it has significance, communicating it, capturing it, developing it, and getting it adopted so that it actually affects people's lives. That's what innovation is. It's a process. It's not a point event. And innovation management is about mastering this and managing this process and realizing, and this is a very important message for people who are very autonomous, such as we see in university environment, is you're not going to be able to do this alone. This is going to be something that you're going to require. You're going to have to involve other people, and they're going to get a cut. And you're going to have to be okay with that because you have a choice between having 100% of nothing or a slice of something. And so that's a really important recognition that each person who wants to do this has to come to. And this is a human process. This is all running on human beings. Human beings are the hardware that all this innovation software runs on. And so we have to understand what it is that drives human beings to innovate and participate in innovation process. And so we'll be talking about that today. Now there's two types of innovation. Type 1, things that you can change the world with through publication. So for instance, the theory of relativity. You know, Einstein worked at a patent office, but we didn't file any patents on the theory of relativity. You just published a paper and everyone is the better for it. Or the idea that fruit flies might be a good model organism. That's just an idea that can advance people's thinking, but it's not something you have to go to the patent office with. But there are innovations, you can say the second type of innovation, that really do require the creation of a product or a service in order for people to benefit. You can't just publish on a cure for a disease. Unless people can go to their spice rack and put it together, it has to be something that a company is going to manufacture and take through clinical trials and so forth. And a new wind turbine design. You know, publishing on a new wind turbine design doesn't do anyone any good. It's only when someone can buy it that you actually, have the impact. So we're already good. Universities are great at dealing with type 1 innovations, but the second type is, where we have to improve. So as I mentioned earlier, this is a different game, and the way that you succeed in a university is very different than the way that you succeed in industry. And in fact, what I'm going to be showing you today is that it's actually, the rules are sort of opposite. And this is one of the things that creates problems as we engage across this interface between academia and industry. And when I'm saying industry today, I'm just going to use that term. It includes entrepreneurs as well because they're living in that same commercial space as well. So just to streamline things, industry means entrepreneurs as well as existing companies. How many people have heard the term intrinsic motivation? There's a good book by Dan Pink, and there's a citation on the next slide that talks about intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation is an important concept to recognize because it's actually what is driving everything that's happening inside of a university. Because universities are filled with knowledge workers. Universities are an oasis, a place that has been set up specifically to attract and foster the success of knowledge workers, people who think for a living. And the way that you create a great environment for knowledge workers is you don't put a bunch of carrots and sticks out there to try and force people into being innovative. What you do is you create an environment that allow people to follow their own internal intrinsic motivations to be successful. I mean, think about Wikipedia. I mean, that's just people wanting to be part of it. No one's getting paid for that. So, and think about how it has completely outcompeted a commercial product that was developed through people being paid to create it, and Encarta from Microsoft. No one would have ever thought that Wikipedia, if you'd gone back in time and said which one will be successful, one that people just volunteer to be part of, or one that people get paid to be part of. No one would have thought that Wikipedia would win, but it did. And that's a testament to the power of intrinsic motivation. So Dan Pink's book, he talks about these three primary intrinsic motivators. They're the desire for mastery, the desire for autonomy, and the desire for purpose. And so how do these play out in a university environment, and how are they prioritized? The way that they're prioritized is really going to be key here, so I want to highlight this. So the most important thing in a university environment is that you have to demonstrate mastery. It's university, being a researcher in a university is competitive. You have a lot of people you're competing with, and the way you pull ahead is by getting everyone to recognize that you're awesome. Simple as that. And if you're not doing that first and foremost, then get out of the game. Second of all, autonomy. And how do you get autonomy? How do you get to do what you want to do? Is getting funding. So being successful at getting grants and other resources is how you achieve autonomy in a university environment. And if you're trying to get those grants before you've gotten recognition, good luck. So that's why the one is more important than the other. And then in tertiary places, purpose. And what's great about working in a university environment is that it's filled with people who have, whether they want to admit it or not, this desire to change the world and make it a better place. Sometimes that's a very personal thing that they don't want to share, and other times it's the only thing they'll talk about. But the important thing is everyone's got it. And but again, if a young professor says to their department head, well, this is how I'm going to change the world, they're going to say, well, you need to focus on getting those publications out. You need to focus on getting some funding for your lab. So it is in third place. So this is what the structure looks like. This is sort of based on like Maslow's hierarchy that talks about, first things first. And, you can't worry about your legacy until you can be sure that you're going to be able to pay your students and postdocs. Now let's look at industry. It's a different world. Purpose is primary. It's all about creating a product that's going to change and reshape the world. That's the first thing they're thinking about. And then second of all is autonomy. It's like you can be successful and you start getting more free reign to do what you can do if you can generate revenue. And that's how you develop your business and how you develop your career. And then mastery is tertiary. And it comes not through really what looks from industry's perspective as a short-term effort, writing a paper, but the long, hard slog all the way to the marketplace to successfully introduce a product and have it sell and be very successful. Okay, so this our red triangle here is the way that things are structured, the schema for industry. And see, it's turned upside down from the way we do things. So as a result, we sometimes have some trouble communicating because we are coming from a different set of assumptions about what is most fundamentally important. So the first piece of advice I'd like to share is that government agencies, they're great. They are set up to help you play the university game. They're set up to help you achieve mastery, autonomy, and ultimately, if we're all lucky, some sort of grand legacy, or purpose. But commercial entities are not playing this game. They are not set up to do this. They are not wanting to support you in playing this game. They have their own game that they're playing. And they'd love it if you would help them, but they want you to play by those rules. So what works with one of these doesn't really work with the other. So if you want to work with companies, you got to speak their language. And it's not what you say, it's what they're hearing. If you can't if you can't look at things from their perspective, if you can't get outside this box of like, well, the most important thing is my publications and the second most important thing is funding for my lab, if you can't get outside of that, you're going to miscommunicate. They're going to hear some things which I've heard them convey back to me about what they're hearing from universities, and it doesn't sound good to them. Despite the fact that no one's trying to be even though people are trying to do their best when they're communicating, if you're coming from a very different perspective, you can come across very badly. And so it's important to realize that the more you understand someone else's perspective, the more power you have in that conversation, because you now know what you want, but you also know what they want. These are the kinds of things that companies tell me that it sounds like they're hearing when they talk to folks from the university. You know, like, hey, I don't work in your company, but here's what you ought to do. I know you think about this every day, but, you know, I'm the smart one here. I think I can tell you what you need. Or, you know, hey, frankly, I'm more interested in improving my reputation than developing a product. You know, if a product comes about, that'd be fine, but really the most important thing is me. I want to play it safe, let you take all the risks, and I need you to fund my lab. No one wants to fund your lab in industry. They don't. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, here's the thing. These perspectives are not unjustified. I've talked to researchers who have said to me, I think that companies should be funding this research in my lab because it's important to advance the state of knowledge in this area. But I can't think of it's one of the fastest ways you get fired, going to your boss and saying, well, I really like Professor Smith's work at the university, so I gave him $300,000 just to follow his bliss. That's just not going to get you anywhere in a company. So the second piece of advice I'd like to convey today is to focus on products. Remember, they're starting with this idea that they need to develop some sort of product or service, some sort of commercial outcome. So, and I've seen researchers who get this, and it's really great. They talk to the company about how can we help you get a product out here, or hey, I heard that you have this problem. I actually think I might have the beginnings of a solution there. Love to talk to you about it. Something that's going to allow them to go back to the boss and say, hey, I've got something. So that is their highest priority, and if you can help them be successful in their highest priority, you know, you're speaking their language and you're going to have some success with them. And this is why IP is important. Now, everyone who's worked with industry in a university, almost to a person, probably can tell me some sort of bad story about intellectual property, to the point where now when I talk to researchers about intellectual property, they make a face when they say IP. They may do this gesture. Well, intellectual property, and that's the arm extension, and it's great. I mean, I've actually said, you know, every time you say IP, you do this arm gesture where you extend it. Can you tell me about that? And they said, it's just I don't want to talk about it. And then the next time he said IP, the arm went out again. It's very ingrained, and so it's been largely because there's been a lot of stumbling blocks as universities have tried to talk about intellectual property. And there's been also some misunderstanding on the part of many faculty about the role of intellectual property in these kinds of collaborations with industry. I mean, again, remember, if you're starting with this motivation, it's more, you know, if it's more important to you to fund your lab than to develop some sort of product at some point, yeah, IP seems like it's a distraction. But you will be doing yourself a disservice if you do not take intellectual property seriously. And if you can just kind of keep that arm down, you'll be in much better shape. Also, poker face. IP enables products and commercial success. That's what it means to the company. Now they're going to say, I mean, obviously they're negotiating. They're going to try and get the best deal that they want or they can get with regard to IP. It would be great if you just hand it all over. But IP is what allows companies to justify investing in research and development. Right? If you don't own something, which is what intellectual property is a way of doing, if you don't have a way to get rights, proprietary rights in something, it's not yours, so why do you invest in it? And as I was, you know, as Cindy and I were talking about just a moment ago, like, when's the last time you ever rented a car and you put premium gas in it? You know, you don't take care of things that you don't own. Hardwood floor in your apartment? No, don't do that. So you have to recognize that this is a fundamental way for you to get taken seriously by a company. It's your ticket. Handling intellectual property the right way is your ticket to playing as an equal partner. Now, I can say that I had some skepticism about whether or not this was feasible when I started the Industry Alliances office at UC Berkeley. But after 2 years and hundreds of agreements, I was able to confirm that you can do deals with companies that handle intellectual property in a win-win way, that you don't have to give away intellectual property rights in order to be successful in working with them. It's just not the case. In fact, what you're doing when you give intellectual property rights away in research collaborations is you're basically signaling, you know, what's going to come out of my thinking here, not that valuable. So please treat me as sort of a vendor of research services. That's what you're doing when you say intellectual property is not valuable. But if you want to be a partner and you want to create the kinds of relationships that lead to sustainable long-term relationships, you need to say, look, we have stakeholders in our research enterprise the same way that you have shareholders in your company. You know, the taxpayers invest in us and we need to get a return for them in the same way that you need to get a return for your shareholders. Let's talk about win-win outcomes for how we handle intellectual property. That concept has served me very well in negotiating many research agreements at this point. Tripled industry support at Berkeley. By taking this approach, I've helped AgriLife lock down about $100 million by helping them create a program that does exactly this. So it's this is the way to handle it. And so if you want to go down this route of being a vendor of research services, it's not that it's always wrong. It's just that it doesn't tend to lead to very much, and it doesn't help you probably achieve some sort of great goal for your program. Going down this other route, where you talk about intellectual property as something we're both going to benefit from, is the way to build long-term collaborations and great working relationships. So my third piece of advice is understand IP rights. This doesn't mean you have to know how to file a patent, but you need to understand that they're the foundation of creative, robust, and energetic university-industry partnerships. And how you communicate the value of intellectual property determines your status in that relationship. It's as simple as that. Patents are primarily tools of commerce, I will also add, and it's a mistake to think of them as publications. A lot of people make that mistake. So don't try to use patents to build your reputation. That can be a side effect, but what we see is a lot of people trying to use them inappropriately in a non-commercial fashion. I'll just elaborate on that a little bit. Proper use of a patent is to create a commercial opportunity. And the way you're doing that is you are creating barriers to other people temporarily. Patent is like a temporary monopoly, about 20 years. And so that's what it's for. That's why it was created. So if you are, coming from this product focus, if you're in a company, you're like, yeah, of course, that's what it is. Patents allow you to gain an advantage in the marketplace. But if you're inside of a university and you're playing the university game, you hear patents and you go, it's a way that I can get credit and demonstrate my mastery of a subject by, getting this award, this award that I put on the wall. The patent is a way of rewarding me for my being innovative. And it's not what it is. It's not what it is. And first of all, patents are not a great way to get any kind of recognition because they're not peer reviewed. None of your peers are looking at any of these patent applications. It's one person at the patent office that you're trying to convince that you should be able to get a patent. And your lawyer is doing most of the work. And also patents cost a lot of money, $25,000 a pop. That's an expensive way to try to get recognition. So it can be a side effect. Like I said, you can get people say, you have an issued patent. That's great. But really the question people should be asking is, and what is the product that's on the market as a result of you getting a patent? A patent by itself is certainly not a license to print money. It's just a license to spend money. And so there has to be some sort of commercial activity. There has to be a clear plan. You can't just say, I want to protect this idea. You have to say why you're going to protect it in order to justify this kind of expense. Now, I mentioned earlier that you can't do this alone. And I know that all of you are feeling the increasing need to show that your programs are impactful, and people want to see, where the societal benefits are going to come from. And a company selling a product that you have developed or developed in part is a great way to do this. And it can be a way that you can increase your chances of getting federal funding if you can show these kinds of results. Also, creating a company, working with the Coastal Bend Innovation Center here to get connected with entrepreneurs who could get excited about what's happening in your program, who could buy into your vision for what it is that you want to do to change the world. I think that's very exciting. And in either case, you're going to need somebody else to be involved, because you're not going to, you can't do what you do, which is already more than a full-time job, and then do some of these other more than full-time jobs as well. And so attracting a partner, whether it's an existing company or an entrepreneur, you have to get them in at the right time, and that's why you need a strategy. So my fourth piece of advice is to develop your strategy now. Now, the best time to plant an oak tree, they say, is 10 years ago. But the second best time is today. So I think that same thing here is that you are already, whether you have really, like I said, whether you're willing to admit it or not, there's something you want to do to change the world, something you see that could be better. So let's come up with that plan today. What's that plan to make that change? What's the vision that you are trying to achieve? And I can just tell you right now, it's not going to happen just passively, and it's not going to happen simply by publishing papers. If what you're trying to do is going to have to impact people's lives to something that they're going to buy, then you have to come up with a plan. And now, how many of you are familiar with something called the Dunning-Kruger effect? Anyone heard of this? Okay. Very simple. It's an observation, psychological observation, that people who are not that competent often think that they are, and people who are extremely competent often think that they're not. And so one of the nice things about working in a university environment is that we have selected for creating an environment that is full of competency. But we also, because of this effect, because competent people have high standards, they don't really think that they're competent. They don't trust that what they've got is good, because they're always pushing themselves harder and pushing themselves further. And Jerry Cote is the department head of bioengineering in College Station. And he told me that if he could go back in time, he started 5 companies, all technology startups. He said if he could go back in time, he'd have someone tapping him on the shoulder and say, enough iterating, let's go ahead and release this product. Because what people do is they say, this is, oh, I've got a solution, but it could be better. And then they iterate and they iterate and they iterate. So in other words, what I often find is that as I talk to researchers, that they already have solutions. But because of this desire for perfection, they don't realize that what they've got is actually already good enough to either help people today or to get a company interested in what they've got. Another factor that plays into this is that the university game teaches you not to appreciate solutions. When's the last time you ever got a grant because you had a solution to a problem? It's always because you've got a problem that you're going to get a solution for. So when every time you've ever had a problem, you got paid for it, but every time you got a solution, you didn't, you're going to tend to really bias yourself towards focusing on problems. And you're going to try and turn solutions back into problems. So what I'm saying here is that you probably need someone who can be a little more objective about what you're doing, to ask you some questions about what you've got, what you're trying to do, and think about a strategy. And what I found is that in the course of developing a strategy, like here's where I am today, here's how I want to change the world. As we start to look along that, as we start to go through this process, we start to see where intellectual property is or where it's trembling on the edge of becoming real. Because universities are a super saturated solution of innovation, because you have probably unappreciated wealth in terms of innovation, because you have been thinking, you are a knowledge worker, you've been thinking about your field every day for years and years, and getting support and thinking about that area for years and years. And so, there's some ideas there. And what I think we see is that when you just expect people to self-identify their own innovation, they have some problems with it. And so don't feel bad about that, but get some help. Get someone to help you out. So as Jamie mentioned earlier, I'm the Director of Innovation Management for Texas A&M AgriLife Research. And I set up the Office of Innovation Management to address these limiting factors that I've been talking about today. I previously worked in the Office of Technology Commercialization as Director of Licensing and IP, and had the opportunity to repair and streamline and improve those processes. And what happens when you have a functional tech transfer office, you start to realize, so you have the engines working, but then you start looking at the fuel that's coming into it. And what we're seeing here is that because of these issues that I've been talking about today, we're not getting the best innovations. And I know, because I sit down with researchers and they tell me about what they're doing, and then it doesn't mature because of these impediments. So what we like to do is, and I'm going to just kind of line out the process here, is we sit down with a researcher, and the first question is, what is it that you want to achieve? What's the vision? And it can be one of many things you want to achieve, but it's a goal. We talk about that goal. And then we do an event analysis, which is where you work backwards and you say, well, for that to happen, what are all the things that would have to happen before then? It's simple, but it's easier to do when you're getting some help. And then what you do is you start thinking about the assumptions that underlie some of these events occurring, and you start testing those assumptions. Like, for instance, one of the things you might say is, well, this is I want to make a windshield wiper that will last forever. This is an actual real example, not at A&M. And I said, all right, well, so someone would have to, sell that windshield wiper, right? Yes. Okay, that means that someone will have to develop that, and that means that they're going to have to believe that there's an opportunity there. Does the world want a windshield wiper that lasts forever? And the researcher said, absolutely, I want a windshield wiper that lasts forever. And I said, well, you know how these companies make their money is on replacements. So are you okay with spending $300 on a set of windshield wipers? Because that's pretty much what they're going to have to pay. Also, you're going to need to have a theft deterrency system installed on your windshield. Oh, okay, well, yeah, there's some problems. And in fact, he said, that would explain the feedback I got from this company I called. Okay, so, but it turns out that that technology that can make something last forever could be applied in other areas. And so that's, getting someone to objectively help you think through this can be very valuable. And then as we help researchers think through how this all could happen, we also develop a plan for tapping into the available administrative resources. So the Texas A&M University system obviously wants to help researchers be as successful as possible in meeting these challenges of making your research more impactful. And so there is a continuing evolution in this innovation, or this administrative ecosystem. And this is just within TAMIS. Of course, there are other parties, who do economic development, who incubate startups. The A&M system has a lot of friends and a lot of partnerships that are very important. But just to give you an example of some administrative resources that reside just within the Texas A&M University system, there would be the Licensing and IP Management Group it used to be called the OTC, now it's TTC, Texas A&M Technology Commercialization. There's a new Ventures Group. Okay, what do each of these groups want to do? They have slightly different goals. It's easy when you're a researcher in a university to look at the administration as this one large amorphous thing, the administration. But all these people have very different goals and attitudes and things they're trying to achieve, and you want to connect with the right people. And so knowing how this ecosystem works is important. The way I like to approach this is at least I know how this all works, and I can help people understand it. But what does Texas A&M Sponsored Research Services do? They are there to help connect researchers to the funding, and they are very good when it comes to federal funding, and they are continuing to innovate and develop in how they can help companies and researchers work together. There's Texas A&M Strategic Initiatives, then there's AgriLife, we've got Corporate Relations, there's AgriLife Administrative Services, there's, of course, my own program, AgriLife Innovation Management. I sort of act as a native guide to help people get where they need to go. So, to summarize, companies are not funding agencies, and so you need to adopt their schema, their framework, what is important to them, and speak their language if you're going to be successful. They will be delighted to speak to anyone who gets this.